Hella tonight we will embark on a journey back in time to a place of red brick walls and curved tile roofs of an ancient imperial city. In the drowsy atmosphere of the late night, you become a palace maid who has just been brought into the royal palace. You do not fully understand what your eyes see and ears hear, but your heart is pounding every time the sound of royal footsteps echoes from afar. Before lying down comfortably, remember to press like and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly find what I do here delightful. Comment where you are listening and what time it is. Now, dim the lights a little, turn on the fan for a gentle background sound, and together we slowly drift into tonight's journey. It begins with the sound of the city gate closing behind you. You have just left your parents carrying a small bag containing beetle leaves with areca nuts and a phoenix-winged beetle pack, and a bamboo hairpin, the only item not kept at the inspection gate. The supervisor looks at you and writes something in a book, her eyes showing little emotion, just habit. And so you, a girl born in a village with many bamboos, officially enter the inner palace. You are not allowed to go straight to the emperor. It's not that easy. First, you stay with 20-some other girls in a small chamber called the Tranquil Heart Hall. The name sounds elegant, but in reality, at night, it is like a drill. During the day, you wake at the fourth watch to learn rituals. How to bound not too low, not too fast. You remember the first day of bowing when you almost choked. That first day, you were taught how to correctly call the different types of incense, non-white incense, yellow incense. But strangely, until now, you have never seen anyone burn them. An older junior sister whispers that incense is only burned during important events. For example, if the emperor dreams of something mysterious. On regular days, the fragrance in the palace mainly comes from hair, because everyone scents their hair with orange blossom and lemongrass water. Sometimes you feel like you are living in an ancient shampoo advertisement. Of course, you are not used to it. On the first night, you cried under the blanket, crying quickly so that in the morning your eyes would not be swollen, because you were afraid of being chosen to serve tea, an unofficial position but one that attracts the most attention. Moreover, anyone who is clumsy might be reported to the supervisor and at least skip dinner. You do not remember how long you cried, only that the next morning, a roommate handed you a glutinous rice cake and said, "The first night, everyone is like that, but if you survive long, you'll find this place sometimes more fun than home." You did not believe it. How could it be fun with all these rituals? Foot ointment smells, waking up before dreaming anything. But then you smiled, because that sentence was really cute. After a few days, you begin to realize the inner palace is not entirely lonely. Someone whispers that in this palace, if you are not exceptionally beautiful, you must be twice as clever. If not clever, at least you must know how to write poetry. If your poetry is poor, then it's best to know how to smile just enough, not too bright, or you'll be suspected of scheming. You are living among a garden full of people, but everyone is a leaf, quietly falling at the right time. And so you begin a new life, where even sneezing at the wrong moment can change your fate, or at least a meal with an extra piece of steamed fish. You probably could not survive here if you dislike subtlety. But if you can listen to the fan's soft flutter hitting the brick floor every summer noon, perhaps you will love this place like a pillow to hug on a long night. You are not sure how you were chosen for the palace. Some say that year 2 girls from your village were selected. One was you, the other the daughter of the village head. The other girl was more beautiful, whiter skin, even able to read to Chinese poems. But you had smiling eyes and were not afraid of chickens. That's right. The day Emperor Vaihan passed through the village, they arranged a lion dance, dragon dance, and even released chickens to see which girl would not scream. You stood still, watching the chicken as if measuring its height. Perhaps, because of that, you were named. Entering the palace was not like in stories. No red sedan chair, no ceremonial music. You were wrapped in a pale grey robe with a few other girls, travelled by a small boat, then walked a full day through tea hills, acacia forests, and fragile brick paths. At each rest stop, you were not called by name, just the third girl from the left or the one with shorter hair. Your old village. Name had to be hidden like hiding the smell of sticky rice under a handkerchief. In the palace, you were given a new name, usually a soft one like a willow leaf, or short like Aitiong or Thun Lam. A senior palace maid once told you that in the past, a girl was chosen only because she could embroider a crane without the back of the fabric showing. Another for a voice like a wind chime. Some were admitted because their grandfather had been a geomancer for the royal family. This shows that being a palace maid is not only a game of beauty, but also the result of many layers of calculation, and sometimes arrangement. Thinking back to the days at home, you were once taught to fold betel leaves, because your mother said that knowing how to fold them beautifully would help you survive in a place where people watch without speaking. Back then, you did not understand, but now you fold them once a day for older junior sisters. Indeed, everyone nods approvingly. Once the supervisor whispered, "She is careful. Will survive long in the palace." It sent chills down your spine. You entered the palace expecting silk pillows, flower, soups, and fragrant lotus every afternoon. But after 3 days, you realized a palace maid's life is like a sticky rice cake. Smooth outside, full of beans inside, and eating too much makes you choke. Your day starts before the rooster crows, without a clock. But at the exact time when the sun has not risen, the palace watchman strikes the wooden clapper 3 times. The first to wake, the second to rise, the third if you haven't gotten up then you're doomed. Every time you rise late is recorded as a fault, called deduction of merit, like part of your salary being cut without asking. You wash your face with orange leaf water, but not every day. Sometimes only rainwater is shared by the girls, a ladle each. Bathing, forget it, twice a week is already luxurious. Those at Kainuyet department get their own wooden basin but must wash, dry, and never let anyone see. Clothing must be exact. Inner robe with no extra threads, outer robe tied correctly, heart always on the left. Do not tie the wrong side, or you will be said to have thoughts contrary to ritual. Hair must be neatly tied high, never loose. Unless you are sick, but then no one cares about beauty. Breakfast is usually thin porridge, with a few slices of pickled radish or a steamed rice cake from yesterday. Lunch is slightly better, rice, soup, sometimes fish, stew, or a piece of fried tofu. But if there is a major ceremony, you eat last, leftovers from the empress and concubines. You have no right to demand, but you have the right to chew slowly. That is the only right you keep at meals. To chew carefully, to feel full and think of ways to survive. Afternoon is for small tasks, washing cloths, embroidering ceremonial clothes, cleaning corridors, arranging betel leaves, preparing ritual rooms. Strangely, the work repeats yet never feels the same because everything changes according to the ruler's whim. Today she likes beetle leaves folded like phoenix wings, tomorrow like a chicken's beak. You just smile silently. Yes, phoenix chicken beak, breaks are flexible. Sometimes you sit and listen to stories, sometimes learn rituals again because a maid misstepped into the wrong hall. Sometimes, just as you lie down, the bell calls for ceremony, and you run while tying your robe and praying your hair does not come loose. You share the room with 3 or 4 others. Beds are wooden, without mattresses. In winter, you curl up like dried fish. In summer, mosquitoes buzz like a choir. But in those miserable nights, you hear each other's real stories. Who was married off as a child? Who was a scholar's child? Who ran away to join the selection team carrying water to feed 3 siblings? You have few things to call your own. A bamboo hairpin, a wooden box of needles, a small bag of letters from home. That is all your possessions, but you keep them as part of your soul. They remind you that you once had a place called home. You do not resent, do not dare, but you do not delude yourself either. You know you are neither flower nor moon. You are a servant in a smooth machine wrapped in silk. Your daily task is not to slip out of the preset folds. Yet, on nights lying on a wooden bed, seeing moonlight through the window, you still quietly ask, do people outside also rise at the 4th watch to fold beetle leaves? You do not have an answer yet, but you know tomorrow you will rise early. You stepped into the palace not for money, truly. At that time, people did not call it salary, only gentle terms like reward, tribute, money, or seasonal silk allocation. But then you realize being a palace maid, though not rich, is not poor if you know how to keep and when to send. Each month, you are given a portion of support depending on rank, duty, and years in the palace. The amount is not enough to buy land, but enough for a new robe each season and a little gift to send home. Additionally, there is rice and crop allocation. If that year has little flood, you may receive a few extra measures of rice or pieces of silk granted by the king's generosity. So the women of the inner palace maintain filial duty toward their mothers. You do not know what the other palace maids send home, but every 3 months. You have someone at the courier station send a small package, usually a few copper coins, some undyed cotton, and sometimes a small bag of medicinal herbs soaked in oil for your mother or for headaches during seasonal illnesses. Your mother does not know what rank you hold in the palace, only that her child works near the hall of Buddha and feels reassured. And even though you are only a low-ranking maid, you feel proud every time a package is sent home. Once, you even asked to have your mother's name embroidered on a handkerchief, secretly asking a nun in the tranquil residence to stitch it during her free hour. When sending it, you only wrote a few short words to your mother this time. Your hand did not shake. You have heard that some in the palace saved enough to build a new house for their parents. After serving for many years and receiving a large reward, but there are also those who send nothing home, because they need everything to survive in the palace amid ceremonies, inspections, and personal necessities like hair, incense, shampoo, and underwear labeled with their names. For you, the money is not much, but just enough, and what warms your heart most is that you can send it home and still survive. You once heard a supervisor say that money in the palace is like well water. Scoop too little, it is cool. Scoop too much, it becomes murky. So you learn to scoop just enough. Once, after receiving extra money following a grand ceremony, you did not spend it immediately but saved it, secretly sending it home with a short letter. Your mother could buy 2 more baskets of new rice seedlings. Do not regret the planting work. You know your mother will not cry over the money, but because you still remember the way home, one night, while washing handkerchiefs in a stone basin. You thought to yourself that being a palace maid is not just about serving or reading poetry, but about earning a bit of peace for those at home. That peace is unseen by anyone, but you believe it is growing into a small flame in the old kitchen where your mother sits sewing clothes, waiting for your return. In some season, you begin to get used to life in the palace, but the longer you stay, the more you realize palace maids are not merely servants, but characters with strange roles between power and silence. One early morning, while wiping the stone corridor in front of the Kinthine Hall, you see an older palace maid greeted very slightly by a court attendant. Not a perfunctory greeting, but a respectful nod, as if reserved for someone who can make the velvet curtains sway gently at the right moment. You later learn she once read books to the emperor when he was a child. Just reading books, yet enough to make a boy remember and become emperor. From then on, she is called the keeper of memories, holding no official title, yet respected by all. You understand that in the inner palace, a maid's value is not recorded in a register, but in small things like steady breathing when presenting offerings, or choosing a gentle word instead of sorrow, in a poem offered to the emperor. You gradually are assigned to rotation shifts, not heavy work, but requiring understanding of people. For example, you must prepare a room when the youngest princess visits. She dislikes the scent of magnolia flowers, but enjoys the sound of wind through bamboo blinds. How to make the room faintly echo sound without letting the wind blow into her ears. You think all night and choose to hang a string of sandalwood beads at the door, softly chiming while keeping warmth. The next morning, the princess praises it as a whisper of someone who once loved her, and thus your name is remembered. Another time, you were chosen to attend the Dowager Empress to the Namjiao altar. Though one among dozens, you are repeatedly instructed. Do not breathe heavily. Do not turn your head quickly. Do not let your robe strings come loose. You realize that living in the palace is like training in a silent martial hall, every movement governed by rules. The judge invisible. The other maids you meet are like yourself, quiet, unremarkable, but each has a special skill allowing them to exist. Some sing in ethnic languages, summoned whenever the empress has insomnia. Some cook chicken porridge without spices, using fresh bamboo leaves to boil. You are known for eyes that speak what should not be said. At some point, you learn to wink lightly to signal your shift partner that the Dowager Empress is changing robes. You learn that if a maid combs her hair too long, she is sad you no longer remember when you first noticed. You only know you have become a part of a painting no one draws, a small dot. Yet if missing, the entire palace rhythm falters. You realize that in the inner palace, silence is a form of power. What is unsaid can guide marriages, succession, and influence hearts. A well-timed sigh could cause an official to be sent to the frontier, or a marriage postponed, and so you, once chosen for not fearing chickens, have become someone who can adjust steps so that clogs do not echo in stone corridors. You understand some things need not be spoken, only appearing at the right moment, smiling lightly at the right tone, and withdrawing properly. Once you wondered if you were merely a servant. The answer came one rainy night, when the emperor passed by and unexpectedly asked if you knew any music to make dreams more vivid. You bowed lightly and said, "The wind melody in incense season." He smiled faintly and moved on. You were not sure it was praise, but the next morning, your meal included an extra slice of sweet cake. One early winter afternoon, when the wind begins to slip through roof tiles like a sharp blade on skin, you are assigned to sweep the corridor outside the Candion Hall. While holding the rag, you consider asking for an extra bowl of ginger porridge that night, as your throat has been sore since yesterday. But then you hear hurried footsteps, and the bell ringing repeatedly sounds, never good in the inner palace. You stand against a wooden pillar, peering through the bead curtain, and see a group escorting a palace maid. She is about a year into the palace, named Lou. Her hair is messy, robe untidy, eyes vacant as if her soul has been drained. Her crime, you later hear, was secretly taking scraps from the ceremonial clothes store to stitch her own undergarment. A small act, perhaps instinctive, to protect herself from the cold. Yet in the palace, taking anything from the store without permission is considered theft of ceremonial items. The first punishment is being publicly shamed. Her embroidered namecloth is hung on the main corridor pillar with a note accusing her of unauthorized use of ritual items. 3 days later, when the incident does not settle, the punishment escalates. She is beaten with a rattan rod. You hear the rod hitting the quilted robe as clearly as a drum in court music. Each strike is a gasp, not of the one beaten, but of those watching. Afterwards, she says nothing, but you hear she is transferred to menial labor, cleaning privies, hauling water from the well, and preparing rooms for post-ceremony. No longer called a standard maid, she becomes a lower-ranked inner worker, soft way of saying fallen from rank. Other punishments you have seen or heard include recording merit deductions, removing a portion of monthly rations, confiscating personal items from pillow to hairpin stripping personal dignity, extra shifts assigned harsh tasks like carrying water, washing ritual rags, guarding cold halls, confinement, no leaving the room, no contact, a type of soft isolation. But the heaviest punishment you ever heard from a supervisor, in a very quiet voice, is expulsion from the palace at night with nothing to take. She told of one person caught secretly sending love letters, expelled on a freezing night, barefoot. No one dared accompany her. Whether she lived or died, the story hung as a threat over every silent meal, from the 6 days watching Lou punished. You fold your robe more carefully, pin every needle in its box, count every washed cloth, not because you fear losing things, but because you fear something misplaced could be used as evidence for a crime you did not commit. You never ask for extra. Even when hungry or cold, you understand that in the palace, everything has a price. Even keeping your own name is a silent battle. That night, you dream of Lou's eyes without hatred, without fear. Just eyes once used to the moon, now staring at the wall. You do not intentionally involve yourself in the concubine's affairs. Teaching in the inner palace is like a gilded chessboard, seemingly soft, but one wrong step loses your head, even a small one, bowed as low as yours. That day the air was humid, raining, as if the entire city was soaked in mood. You were ordered to carry a tray of beetle and herbal water to Ho An Hall, where the concubine Levi resides. She appears gentle, speaks softly, smiles slightly, but everyone knows not to provoke her. You do everything correctly, holding the tray with both hands, eyes lowered, steps measured. But when reaching the hall door, a strange call from behind makes you pause for a moment, just enough for another maid to bump into your hand. The tray tilts slightly, but nothing spills, though something small falls to the stone floor, sliding under the curtain. A dark-colored embroidered pouch. You have never seen it in your tray. You do not pick it up, knowing the rule that anything dropped in a concubine's hall is no longer your responsibility. But that night, the very same embroidered pouch was found. It was now neatly placed in the chamber of consort Tuonko, Elvi's covert rival, containing a few pale brown incense sticks suspected of being laced with a sedative. You were summoned to sit under the dim light in the supervisory hall. In front of you were the chief eunuch and a palace maid you did not know, but her eyes looked as if she had just drained a pot of strong liquor before fixing her gaze on you. You did not deny, did not cry, did not tremble. You only recounted exactly what had happened. At that moment, someone bumped into me. The object fell. I did not pick it up because I did not know what it was, and nothing like that was prepared in my tray. Someone snorted, a tiny sound enough to make your pulse tighten. Yet you kept your gaze steady and added softly, almost as if not, I know the rules. If it is a precious object, touching it without reporting is severely punished. If it is forbidden, one dare not touch it. Therefore, I left it untouched. I have lived in the palace for 5 years, relying neither on beauty nor family, only knowing when not to touch what does not belong to me. A brief silence, then the chief eunuch nodded lightly. The palace maid opposite you changed color, the kind of transformation from bone to lightning. But you knew you had escaped, not because anyone defended you, but because you were too small to pose a threat, yet attentive enough not to be accused falsely. 3 days later, you were transferred to the hall responsible for ceremonial lamps, a tedious but safe duty. You understood this was how the inner palace preserved those who nearly became victims, not yet ready to be eliminated. A month later, you heard that Consort Tuonko was ordered to rest due to nervous exhaustion. No one explained why, but by chance, you saw in a storeroom a half-burnt piece of the embroidered pouch stuffed into a pile of ruined incense, as if trying to bury the unfinished scheme. You told no one, quietly understanding that surviving the inner palace sometimes requires neither loyalty nor cunning, only awareness and luck. That light bump on your arm that day serves as a reminder. Always keep both hands to hold the tray, and never bend to pick up what someone accidentally drops in your place. That morning, you were woken at the 4th watch, no explanation given. You only noticed the silk cloths were meticulously prepared, the hair rinsed fragrant beyond usual, and the entire corridor from Tybin Hall to the meditation hall cleaned to a shine the day before, quietly following the line of palace maids out of the inner court. Your heart raced not from fear, but because you knew today would be special. You were selected to visit the temple with the emperor. Usually, this honor was reserved for high-ranking eunuchs or senior maids accustomed to matching their steps with the bell. But today, somehow, you were among the few permitted to go. Some said it was because the princess had praised you after several poetry readings. Others whispered that the nun in the tranquil residence had mentioned your name in a chant. Whatever the reason, your hands trembled slightly as you received the wooden box of incense prepared for the ceremony. The journey began while it was still dim. Simple yet elegant palanquins rolled silently over damp dirt roads. You did not ride, of course, walking behind. Strangely, you were not tired, perhaps, because the morning air was so clear, or because the distant temple bell seemed to pull you towards some memory. Sitting beneath bamboo in your village, gazing at the June moon. At the temple, leaning against a column, you exhaled softly. It was the first time you had seen a structure standing entirely on a single stone pillar. It resembled a lotus just emerging from water, beautiful enough to bow. You knew you were not alone in feeling this, as you saw even the emperor pause, eyes fixed on the altar in silence. The ceremony was solemn. You were forbidden to look up, only to bow and move according to signals. But in the brief moment you lifted your head to support the incense tray for the inner attendant, your eyes met the emperor's just for a flash. Yet you saw something very human. Not power, not the gaze of a sovereign, but the gaze of someone weary, seeking something quieter than a throne. After the ceremony, you and a few others were invited to rest in the back courtyard. While others sipped chilled lotus water, you quietly sat under a small Bodhi tree. The tree was not tall, but its shade was sincere. Touching the trunk, your fingers met an old carving, a curious four-character poem. Senna, Taquen, lotus blooms, I forget. You did not know who wrote it perhaps. A palace made from a previous era, perhaps a young monk. Yet the verse stayed with you all the way back, echoing each time you passed the wooden doors, washed hands in beetle water, or breathed softly during a short summer nap. 3 days later, a surprise, you were summoned to recite poetry before the emperor at the spring tea ceremony. It was your first appearance at an event with foreign guests. Inside, you felt panic and pride intertwined. But when you spoke, you did not tremble only. The 4 characters echoed in your mind. Sen no, Tarquen. In that moment, you understood that some lessons require no teacher. Some glances need no response. As long as you live sincerely, goodness finds its way naturally. From that temple visit onward, your life in the palace shifted to another atmosphere, not more luxurious, not more noble, but lighter, as if you were no longer bound by echoing clogs or scrutinizing eyes, and began to feel like smoke slipping quietly through each event, sometimes fully present, sometimes just a hint, like the scent of old robes in the incense hall. One day, you were summoned to Diran though, a place few tread unless called by name. You did not know why, only felt your heart drum wildly. There, you were told you were selected as a ceremonial assistant for a moon viewing event, observing the matches between princes and maids. You were not on the list to be matched. You were the one serving. But, as usual, the interest lay not at the center, but around it. That night the moon was so full you felt you could cut a slice and drop it into spring water. Princes sat in rows, their garments neat, but eyes sharp as sparrows. Some maids from your shared quarters wore thin silk skirts, loosely coiled hair without pins to show they were unclaimed. They could recite or respond with poetry, or simply smile when asked their names. You sat behind, pouring water, but your eyes wandered not from curiosity, but to learn. How a tilt of the head could make a prince blush. How another pretends to drop a handkerchief, then elegantly bends just enough for the sleeve to slide to the wrist. You could not master this. Your hands were too familiar with the scent of incense to be smooth. The ceremony ended without ending, no one chosen that day. 2 weeks later, a list was published. 8 maids were married to princes, including your closest friend, the girl who first helped you arrange the beetle tray on that first night. You were happy for her, but felt a strange emptiness, not envy, but knowing that after the moonlit night, she would no longer be the familiar presence in the long corridor. A few days later, she came to bid farewell, bringing a small bag of mung bean cakes and an old hairpin. Here, she said. This hairpin broke on one side. I thought to throw it away, but then remembered, you hold on to things with more heart than I do. You did not cry. But back in your room, You quietly placed the hairpin on the table and lit incense not for worship, but to remind yourself that some bonds only exist within the walls of ancient brick. Once outside, they become memories. You heard others whispering about the joy of being married off by decree, but you knew not everyone resented it. Many saw it as a door to a new world, where they could run a household with status, a private chamber, and no one checking pillows. You were also asked if you wished to be matched. You only smiled, not yet knowing. You still loved the moonlit window frame, the bowl of lotus water from the morning, and the 7-layer wrapping of tea as prescribed by the palace. You were not ready to leave this place, not out of fear of change, but because there were still scents you had yet to learn. You were summoned to the Internal Affairs Office on a hot, early summer morning. As cicadas began their first whispers behind the city wall, no one explained why, only told you to prepare clean clothes and wear your headscarf properly. Anxiety stirred not from fear, for palace maids are not allowed hope. Yet that luxury appeared like sunlight through roof tiles. You were promoted to second rank, palace maid. After 5 years of quiet survival, the new blue-trimmed robe was issued, along with a piece of silk embroidered in gold thread with your name and firm words. Diligent service earns promotion to second rank. It meant that from now on, you would no longer have to wash clothes for others, but could command them to wash for you, at least during ceremonial occasions. Yet you knew the title did not exempt you from back pain, from fingertips smelling of agarwood, nor from nights spent watching medicinal decoctions for the Empress Dowager until the hour of wine. You were assigned to the ceremonial service team in Thurkong Palace, where the elderly were cared for and the observant were watched. Ma Thin, the team supervisor, looked you over from head to toe and nodded without emotion. Your eyes were still clear, your back unbowed. She tossed you a stack of work memos for the week. Monday, change the summer brocade curtains. Tuesday, wash heads. Wednesday, prepare tea for the Empress Dowager. Thursday, attend ceremonial duties. You read it and almost closed your eyes. The handwriting was round and neat, strokes thick and thin, yet each line carried vigilance. Misplace the brocade by an angle, and it's punishment. Leave a stain when washing, and it's noted. Let the tea cool, and a mulberry whip awaits. But do things correctly, skillfully, with grace. And the path to becoming a trusted attendant was not far. Your first night duty came, when the Empress Dowager had trouble sleeping. The elderly often stayed awake late. You tiptoed like a cat, hands holding the teapot, not daring to breathe hard. Another maid carried incense ahead of you. You shadowed her like a ghost. The Empress sipped only once and asked, the new girl who taught you to carry the tray. Sweat ran down your back, but Ma Thin interceded. She learned, Your Majesty. Not a drop spilled. The Empress nodded, and you exhaled, as if surviving a knife-edge game. From then on, you learned to steady your hands, to hear calls from 3 rooms away and guess correctly where to go. Once, when Ma Thin caught a cold, you were in charge of coordinating the new season robe ceremony. You delegated ironing, laying mats, fetching water, and the event passed smoothly. Returning to your room, you smiled quietly, rare smile, for no one shared it. Occasionally younger maids would peek and ask, have you ever seen the Emperor? You only shook your head, smiling. How could I? He's deep in the inner court. We live among 3 corridors, a dozen kitchens, tea rooms, incense storerooms. But once, I saw the golden yellow robe flash across a hallway while I was bending to wipe a silver plate. Just a glimpse, yet my heart skipped 3 beats. The higher your rank, the more you understood. Palace maids are like small chess pieces, but if a piece knows the board, at least it won't be thrown aside too soon. You were not the wisest, but knew when to retreat, how to stand behind without disappearing, how to bow while keeping your spine straight. A strange incident occurred in the last week of autumn that year. A ceremonial robe went missing from the storeroom en route to the laundry. A maid from your team was suspected, and you had to explain. Fortunately, you remembered who had handled it, for you always observed who came and went, and you saved her from a whipping. After that, Marthin looked at you longer, long enough that the next day, she assigned you to take the morning attendance, rare sign of trust beginning. That night, you sat alone under a flickering oil lamp in the corridor. You had already become different from the girl with swollen hands the previous year. The incense no longer made you sneeze. Scolding no longer made you tremble. You had learned the rhythm of this place and began to dream a weary dream of becoming someone others bowed to as a ma. A falling leaf drifted onto your hair. You picked it up, smiled, and tucked it into your sleeve, as if making a quiet promise to yourself. Soon after the missing robe incident, you were transferred to Tharkong Palace. The order came unexpectedly, without prior notice, without congratulations or farewell. One morning, Marthin looked at you and said, "From tomorrow, go to Tharkong under Marthuk." You bowed and responded politely, yet your heart fluttered like a stack of unfolded mats. Tharkong was where the Empress Dowager resided, a woman of immense power. Not because she ruled, but because she once held the Jade Seal. The place was quiet, unlike the young consort's palaces, serene as a deep, bottomless pond upon entering. Every step echoed on stone tiles. Every gaze felt like it had ears. Marthuk, the palace coordinator, looked like a wooden statue, tall, thin, small eyes, half-silver hair neatly pinned like a nail. She said little, only handed you a morning work list before disappearing behind bamboo. Reading it, you realized most time would be spent preparing tea, medicines, and arranging the Empress Dowager's jade boxes, ink boxes, and art letters once. While cleaning the medical cabinets transferred from the Imperial Physician's ward, you noticed something strange. 2 medicine packages labeled identically earthworm, aconite, peach kernel, poria smelled differently. One sweet and thick, the other slightly musty, tingling on the tongue. You weren't a physician, but had served over 5 years. You recognized the latter as spoiled, possibly poisonous. You reported it to Marthuk. She said nothing, only retrieved the packages and nodded. 2 days later, Quan the Y was replaced. No one spoke, no public punishment, only the person handling medicines had changed. From then on, every inspection of medicines included you, and only you. Gradually, you realized medicines were not only for healing, they were a vessel for schemes. In the palace, some things are concealed not by paper, but by fragrance. Since entering the Empress Dowager's palace, you understood that silence could be a weapon. People did not argue or scold. A single mistimed tea, a slightly misaligned robe, or a cooled potion could send someone to grueling labor. One stormy night, you were alone in the medicine room while Marthuk was slightly ill. While inventorying jars, you discovered a slip of paper tucked in the wooden drawer. Faded writing, exchange ginseng on the full moon. Do not be disrespectful. No name, no seal, no address. You burned it, fearing the crime of peeking. But that night, you could not sleep, understanding that these harmless-looking cabinets were silent chessboards, and you had inadvertently stepped into the middle of the game. The next morning, the Empress Dowager ate her bird's nest porridge, as usual, expressionless, wordless. Yet you noticed the maid serving her was replaced by someone unfamiliar, and Marthuk, for the first time, patted your shoulder. Well done. From that day, your name appeared higher on the duty roster. People sought your opinion on room arrangements, selecting silk towels, arranging incense boxes. You replied little, only nodded or shook your head, but everyone understood. Being praised by Thuk commanded caution. You began learning countless details, selecting soft paper to avoid scratching the Empress's hands, adjusting lamplights so the elderly could read without glare, brewing lotus water with the right sweetness, no taint. Small things, yet accumulated. They became trusted currency more precious than rank in the inner palace. Once, you found a silk embroidery inkpot tainted. It was used to subtly mark disliked names. Black ink mixed with ant-stained fabric under light. The embroidered panels were presented to the Empress. You quietly switched the silk, unnoticed. The maid who stitched it later was sent to labor in the garden for 100 days. Some said you were clever, others said cold. You felt neither, only learning to survive like a wild plant by the wall through scorching sun. Bitter wind until one day you bloom. A bloom that needs no witness, only freedom from being uprooted. You were no longer a second-rank maid. You became someone relied upon, greeted with a nod as others passed. Not yet a Ma, but a name whispered among young maids seeking a place on the good teams. One winter night, wind drifting through the window, you silently folded a small paper, memorized it, and placed it in an empty Rouge Boxer private record. No need for anyone to read it. It was for your own peace. One spring morning, Marvine was found dead in a cold bath behind a small bathhouse near the old storeroom. You were on duty in the medicine room, awakened by hurried footsteps and whispers. Marvine was second only to Marthuk, older but still in charge of ceremonial records, overseeing items offered to the Empress. Known for strictness and occasional cruelty, she never tolerated mistakes. Her sudden death stunned the Kong Palace, as if everyone feared they might be next. People said she caught a chill from bathing late, but you knew the bath was forbidden 2 months prior due to broken pipes. You had sealed it yourself. No reason why an experienced Ma, familiar with every corner, would bathe there alone that night while arranging the tea cabinets. You overheard Marthuk whisper to a junior, "Shouldn't have switched the person in a hurry." You said nothing, but inside, ripples spread like a stone in water. 3 days later, an internal order was announced. You officially assumed the role of acting Marvin not by title, but by actual authority. You were given additional keys to the storeroom, the ceremonial roster, and the privilege to choose your fellow attendants for duty. Many eyes turned toward you, some admiring, some doubtful, and some with jealousy hidden behind tight-lipped smiles. You had no time to concern yourself, for all the tasks once carried out by Marvine were now upon your shoulders, checking incense, arranging candles, recording gifts presented by the consorts to the Empress Dowager. Some gifts were wrapped in gold-embroidered paper, containing only a box of pastries, while others, as small as a palm, carried the heavy scent of silver, gold, or amber. You learned to touch each type of brocade and know its origin, to smell a fragrance and guess the giver. Once, you discovered an incense pouch with a sliver of wood carrying a faint scent of soporific powder. You quietly removed it, noted the discrepancy, and returned the rest. The consort who sent it was removed from the roster of offerings for the next season. No one spoke the reason, but in the palace, being crossed off a major ceremonial list hurt more than losing rank. You began to understand that power in the palace did not come from whips or lofty robes, but from small, unseen decisions. A nod from you could elevate someone. A frown could ensure they were never chosen again. It was exhausting, but it kept you alert. One day, you discovered someone had opened the incense storeroom after hours. The seal was lightly pressed, nail marks imprinted on the wax. No names, no proof, but you had glimpsed a red mark on the hand of the maid who served tea that day. You did not accuse her. You simply reassigned her to tend the herb garden, far from the storeroom and medicines. People called it a gentle adjustment, but she never returned to serve the Empress. Perhaps from that moment, people began calling you Mama without official decree, though you still bowed to higher-ranking attendants. Held your handkerchief as on the first day, wore your old shoes because they fit you, knew you were no longer the one who had to bow. Others looked to you to gauge the atmosphere. Yet strangely, you retained an old habit. Every night before sleep, you checked your old rouge box, where you kept slips of paper recording promises to yourself. By now, it was full of hastily written lines, not reacting to scorn, always remembering who had saved you, winning without exposing softness at night as wind swept through the eaves. You would open the box and read a slip. If you are to be a woman of power, be one whom all others must respect. You blew out the lamp and lay down, back straight as on your first day in the palace. But now you no longer felt smally, were a shadow large enough to shelter those still trembling. Learning to survive. That year, a severe drought struck. The well in the palace ran dry to the bottom. The fields outside the walls cracked like dry fish scales. The court issued austerity measures, reducing ceremonial budgets, rations, and manpower. As always, the inner palace was the first to be tightened. A midday decree arrived from the Internal Affairs Office. Each palace must submit a list of attendants to dismiss or reassign, prioritizing the newest, weakest, or least virtuous. In a blink, Thukong fell into a world of whispers, scrutinizing eyes, and muffled cries in the shadows. You were tasked with creating the list for the Empress Dowager. The hand that signed it trembled not from fear, but knowing a single stroke could change lives. There were girls you were taught to fold handkerchiefs, adjust curtains, or offered a cup of water when they were ill. You still had to cross names off, not out of cruelty, but because if you were not firm, the whole system would collapse. In the palace, sentiment is a luxury. Survival comes first. Yet no one knew that while the lower-ranking maids awaited judgment, a silent chess game was unfolding above. The Ma began to take sides, some siding with the Empress to stabilize the palace, some quietly following influential consorts, hoping to shift fortunes with changes in rank. You were invited twice. The first time, a Ma from Trong, PHC, brought a box of premium cinnamon and an ambiguous note, "Sisters, let us help each other survive this term." The second time, a young eunuch delivered a dried orchid card, usually reserved for handwritten notes between those close to the Empress. Both times, you replied with nothing but a cup of lukewarm tea enough for them to understand. You chose no side. The Empress did not ask, Yet that day she drank every drop of the potion you served her down to the last drop, as a silent acknowledgement. Marthuk said nothing, only entrusted you with the keys to the incense cabinets, and the task of organizing the Vulan festival, efficiently yet impressively. It was the first time you had full control over a palace event in the harshest period you had managed. That year, the Vulan festival had no singers, no premium cakes, yet incense and offerings were complete. Ceremonial robes clean, beetle neatly prepared. Consorts attending nodded in approval. The Empress Dowager smiled faintly, sufficient, yet respectful. This event led to your nomination to the Internal Affairs Office. As Marthuk weakened with age, the news felt like rain after a drought. Those who had doubted you began calling you the senior Ma, quieter, gentler. You still wore your old robe, but your back was straighter, your gaze farther, not to show off, but because you had learned to sense the wind from its source. Few knew that after the Vulan festival, you burned a special slip of paper, the list of maids dismissed. You burned it in a secluded corner, not to forget, but to release the memory. One afternoon, standing on the high corridor, you looked down at the moss-dotted tiles. A young maid swept the floor, hair messy, clothes dusty, moving as clumsily as you had over a decade ago. You called her over, suggesting her hair be pinned hieratic matters. She thanked you nervously. You turned away, but warmth rose in your chest, a feeling you hadn't had in a long time. That night, you opened the old rouge box. Today, you added a slip with just 2 words: overcome hardship. You did not dream often, but that night, dreams came like hail in midsummer. You saw yourself lying on a wooden platform in the old room when you first entered the palace. Limbs bound with red silk, mouth gagged with cloth, a row of eyes above staring eyes of maids once expelled, punished, whispering your name before disappearing. You awoke with a start, sweat soaking, heart pounding like a drum in the hall. The sky was not yet bright, only the soft swish of brooms in the corridor. You sat up, poured water, yet the dream lingered all morning, shadowing every glance, every wary greeting dot, until you discovered a damp scrap of fabric in your drawer. It was not yours, a handkerchief used in the bath chamber. You did not leave it. Someone had entered, leaving a warning. You considered every one maid you reassigned, those left off the seasonal lists, even old mamas, discontented with your rank. Yet the gaze of one stood out clearly, like a flower. You had supported her, taught her to fold cloth, spray incense without pain, given extra bird's nest porridge when she was ill. Recently, she had changed, asking questions, lingering, listening secretly. You said nothing, only memorized. Every detail pieced together the final fragment of a suspicious puzzle. You did not get angry. Gently, you called her to the room to pick up fallen papers. As she bent to retrieve a brush, you asked softly, "If someone dislikes me, why do you think that is?" She froze, back straight like a bowstring, not daring to look up. I do not know. Ma must treat everyone well." You nodded and smiled, not judging, not probing. From that day, Neho was assigned to handle incense laundry, meticulous, crucial task with little social interaction. It was a transfer, yet gentle, as if nothing had occurred. And that night, you no longer dreamed. People often say, power makes one cruel. You thought power, if misused, blinds. Blinds through flattery, blinds through believing the surface calm of human hearts. You chose not to be blind. even opening your eyes in sleep. One strange thing you never told anyone: on that month's full moon, you discovered a small amulet tucked behind a Guanyin statue in the Empress Dowager's private altar. The paper depicted a headless figure stepping on fire, with wriggling characters like snakes around it. An old charm, faded. You did not know who left it or when, but you burned it immediately, not out of belief, but to ensure nothing in the Empress Dowager's palace existed except incense and quiet. You understood. The court is a place where no one can fully trust anyone. Yet you still wanted to keep a fragment of innocence for yourself, a small room, old habits, and a rouge box filled with faded slips. That night, after checking the tea storeroom one last time, you sat by the window, gazing at the summer moon, round like a silver tray lid. You tilted your head back and took a long breath. In the moonlight, a single strand of silver appeared in your hair, yet your heart was as still as water. Not because of peace, but because you had made a clean break with what needed to be let go. Before sleep, you added another slip of paper to the old box. The simple line, "Forgiving someone is forgiving yourself," was as much for you as for anyone else. You had once heard an old saying floating through the mouths of former Ma, when people call you by your title instead of your name, it means you have become something. And now you were no longer that. Sister, this girl, or the new arrival in Kang, everyone in the palace, from young maids just learning to walk lightly to old eunuchs familiar with their midday yawns, dressed you clearly. Ma, Nan. The name Nan did not denote sharpness, but a quiet, unhurried demeanor. No one saw you rush, argue, or raise your voice. Yet strangely, everything you suggested was done. Everyone you looked at understood what to do. Thakong itself became like a vast instrument, and each day, in the quiet before dawn, you were the one to tune its strings. You did not need to give orders. A hand on a shoulder, a glance at a slightly askew tablecloth, a half-tilted vase. By the time you walked away, everything was right. No raised voice was needed. One look could make someone flinch, as if called on in class. People began seeking your help more. A young consort wanted medicine for her ailing mother, you assisted. A maid wrongly accused of breaking something, you cleared her name. Ma accidentally dropped an offering during a tea ceremony. You explained to the Empress Dowager that the floor was slippery and let it pass like the wind. Not because you liked intervening, but because you knew a stable empire was one where people trusted someone quietly maintained balance. The young people in the palace both revered and feared you. They whispered that you had eyes in the back of your head, that you could read others' hearts, that you could hear irregular breathing from rooms far away. You never corrected them, only smiled just enough to conceal intent. The more power you wielded, the more fragile it became. If others built monuments to you themselves, they would guard them as fiercely as their own reputations. One afternoon, while recording the winter offerings, there was a soft knock. A young maid holding tea whispered, "The Empress Dowager wishes to see Ma." It was not unusual, yet your chest tightened. She rarely called anyone in privately without a ceremony. You adjusted your hair, changed your robe, and walked the corridor in your familiar rhythm. The door opened slightly. The scent of licorice lingered. A fan swished gently. The Empress leaned back, her gaze distant. You knelt silently. She spoke first. "How long have you been here?" "Years, Your Majesty," you replied. She nodded, "Longer than a lifetime spent as a mother." Looking up, You saw her eyes glint not with sadness, but like clear water running through dry stone. She continued, "You maintain this palace well, very well. Yet sometimes a palace too well kept becomes a thorn for others." You bowed low, awaiting a grand order, a warning, a reassignment, but she only sighed. You continue, "Do not lose yourself. You understood then, when the most powerful person in the palace does not wish to lose you. No one else dares act. You had once written a letter requesting leave to return to your hometown, but never sent it. There was no home left. Your mother had died when you were young. Your father remarried, siblings estranged. Your life had long been entwined with the palace's brick walls, wooden stairs, and curtain cords. Walking the corridor, your shadow was no longer a young girl's, but that of an older woman, a mother uncalled. That night, you added a slip to the old rouge box. Written delicately, it read, "Power is not to keep, but to prevent others from losing." You no longer remembered when waking early ceased to be rushed. No more quiet steps of night shift maids. No thick duty rosters hung on wooden columns only. A gentle breeze through the windows, carrying the faint scent of early autumn sun and the sound of leaves falling like a sigh. From a past life, the Kong now had another in command. You had withdrawn quietly, without fanfare or farewells. The small room by the eastern corridor became your last sanctuary. Tea without watching the clock, sitting by the windowsill without adjusting posture. You still rose early, but not for duty. You washed your face with water infused with lotus petals, combed your hair with the old horn comb gifted by Ma Thuk. Each stroke brought memories, the tilted gaze of a young clerk from years past, Nurho's muffled sobs at night, the frail shoulders of the Marvin hidden behind curtains. One late afternoon you were summoned again. The Empress Dowager had grown much older, her hair white as incense ash. You and she were silent for a long moment. Then she asked, "Do you remember your name?" You smiled faintly. "I remember, Your Majesty, though no one has called me that for long." She nodded. "Then today, I shall call you one last time. Your name is Nan. One call, one door closing a lifetime," as a palace maid concluded. No bells, no festivals. Yet you knew the silence was the greatest gift life had offered, not forgotten, but dissolved into every corridor corner, every curling wisp of incense, every lesson passed to the next generation. On your final night in the palace, you sorted the old rouge box. The slips had faded, but the words were clear. Back straight, unmoved by disdain. Overcome hardship. Power is not to keep, but to prevent others from losing. You gathered them all and burned them in the censer. Each flicker transformed memories into gentle ash. The lamp in your room dimmed. A paper fan continued to turn silently. Outside, the autumn wind rustled through white chrysanthemums, leaves falling softly. You lay down, no role to guard, no call to answer, only yourself and the first peaceful sleep in over a decade behind the golden curtain.